Hi all, I have another very interesting game to show you from the candidates tournament in round 2. Alexander Grischuk against Wesley So. E4, E5 from Wesley So. Grischuk plays knight F3. We go into the Royal Pez. Pretty standard stuff so far. Okay, so here C3, black castles, H3, bishop B7, knight BD2, rook E8, which there's a kind of weakness for the last move, the F7 pawn. And it might seem pedantic, but this is actually challenged. And you might think, is this some sort of weird, just wanting a draw or something, because if here, then here. There's more to it, actually, than meets the eye here, I believe, with knight G5. The rook does go back. On D5, it's actually kind of interesting how this defensive measure can give white an advantage. I'll show you. E takes here is pretty dangerous for black. If knight takes, you might think knight takes F7 and some sort of fried liver attack. This is only enough for equality, this kind of thing, which is very sharp. It's only going to be a small edge for white. It's a very sharp line. There's no need for any of that. Here, there's actually a really strong move in this position, which is again kind of weakness of the last move stuff, which is basically knight D E4. This seems to give white a big advantage. The queen's going to be landing on H5 here. For example, rook F8, queen H5 is all of a sudden extremely dangerous for black, this position. There's things like after knight F6, queen G6, for example. So it could be like a disaster for black, like this, for example. It just shows that it's quite a dangerous idea that's present in this position on that D5. And the other way is for black to try and be a bit cleverer to do this, but then that fails to D6, giving white a big advantage as well, because now he's on F7, and that's pretty horrible. This is a pretty sharp line as well, but white ends up with a big advantage. So both ways, white ends up with a big advantage there. It's not for a draw. It's actually for a big advantage potentially to try and catch black. But yeah, rook F8, very sensible move. Rook F8, just going back there. So rook E1, and now D5 here. And actually, keep a track of the C5 square here. It was protected by the pawn and the bishop, so keep a track of this square in particular as we go through this game. E takes D5 kind of opens up this diagonal. Knight takes D5. And there's still another idea of leaving that knight aggressively on the 5th rank. It's not going to retreat here. If it retreats, black will just be doing very well after knight F4. For example, D4, knight A5. This is an even position. But no, the knight on the 5th rank, the aggressive piece, the only piece in the opponent's territory, is kept there, and the other knight joins in with knight D F3. We have now queen D7. If that knight's kicked here, then it can go to E4. And this is not so bad for white either. This is a very, very nice position, for example, like this, with big pressure on E5. And it's difficult to do something about this, you know, bishop, then F6, then knight F5, perhaps. So this is really a tricky position here, even in this line. Maybe D5 was a bit too aggressive, but it seems as though white has got a lot of opportunities here. We have queen D7, D4. Not minding getting an isolated pawn. That's the last, I mean, that's not the big priority here after E takes, C takes. What is happening here? White's opening up this file, this C file. He's got the isolated queen's pawn, but look at that C file now. H6, knight E4, rook F8, bishop D2. Now this looks as though, is this like a mega aggressive move or not? Well, the thing is that C file is really important here. And there's a nice potential outpost on C5 as well. We have knight F6. This might be an inaccuracy, maybe better, is knight B6. Bishop F8. We can see rook C1 using that outpost square is giving white an advantage here. So something seems to be, well, a small edge, but that might be okay for black yeah, that line with bishop f8. So anyway, knight f6 was played, and we have rook c1. So as though maybe knight c5 is on the cards now. Knight takes e4. This is also interesting for the d pawn here. So let's look at this position for a moment. Knight takes d4. Loses outright. That's definitely a weakness of the last move. Knight e5 pouncing into the e5 square, hitting the queen and f7 is a total disaster, train wreck for black. Yeah, this is just the total train wreck after knight takes f6, bishop, rook takes e8 there, or g takes, then bishop takes e8. It's a total train wreck. So it's totally can't be played. Knight takes d4. So that pawn, although you might have thought it's weak, it's not exactly that weak here. Knight takes e4 then. Rook takes e4. Bishop f6. And now this is really took me by surprise, because out of what seems to be a bog standard like royal of pairs, we all of a sudden have a lot of resources being transferred to attack the black king now, and it starts with this next move. I wonder if you can guess it here. White to play in this position if I give you 5 seconds starting from now. So yeah, what was, you know, it seemed to be bog standard territory. Yeah, rook g4 is now some sort of hack attack. Note also that c5 square has been now neglected by black, but this pawn, you know, is too dangerous to take here. Black actually has to defend against bishop takes h6 and plays king h8. So if he plays knight takes d4, knight takes d4, bishop takes h6. Yeah, this is very dangerous as well. So we have king h8. On g6, by the way, there's that pinned pawn. Rook takes g6 check there. So king h8 is tried. And now, guess what? Another really attacking move. It's incredible, actually. I find this game a little bit incredible. How white goes for the attack quite aggressively. In the round 1 game of Grischuk, you know, when he played rook g5, that seemed to be optimistic. But here, I think there's a more justified optimism for going for the black king with the rooks. Yeah, Grischuk and his rooks. So white to play here. What would you play in this position? 5 seconds. Okay, rook c5. This is very dynamic, aggressive. The idea to try and get this rook to h5, and then it will be like mating scenarios. So it doesn't really matter about the d pawn here. It's just too dangerous to take this d pawn. In fact, knight takes d4 here. Knight takes, bishop takes. There's a nasty pin with bishop c3, pinning the bishop to the queen, and there's no opportunity to hit g2. That's protected anyway. So this is just losing a piece for black. Rook e4. Doesn't matter, we just take here, just winning a piece and hitting g7. So yeah, this pawn is immune here, and this rook's now threatening rook h5. We have rook ad8, and instead of rook h5 here, which might be tempting, there's actually an even better attacking move, a short move but aggressive, super aggressive. Another key move. Yeah, this is really wonderful stuff by white in this game. What would you play here with white? Okay, queen c1, a short move, but it's the battery on h6 now. Bishop takes h6, also pressure down the c file. And it's very, very difficult for black here. I think there's numerous threats actually. It's not just bishop takes h6. There might even be d5 here for rook takes c7. Yeah, this double attack on both sectors of the board. We have knight takes d4. So yeah, knight takes d4 now. And if bishop takes d4, this wasn't played actually. Black temporarily gave up a piece. If bishop takes d4, not recapturing immediately, then it's just bishop takes h6. And for example, this bishop takes g7, queen goes into h6, and it's going to be mating here. Black has to just could only delay being mated here, and that pawn's pinned as well, by the way. So that's just a total nightmare scenario. So yeah, it's that the automatic recapture of the piece cannot be played, it seems. So rook e4 is played instead. Now we have rook takes c7, queen takes d4, bishop e3, and now look, the bishop's hanging, the queen's attacked, the rook's pinned to the queen. Black tries what seems to be a very resourceful try. Rook takes g4, offering the queen here, and it seems as though this actually could be taken here, but it isn't. It's just ignored for a much safer continuation. Hg is played, which actually leads white to a winning advantage anyway. But just for the record, bishop takes d4. This is the conception of Wesley So, perhaps. But actually, it turns out here, white can play rook takes f7 with a big advantage technically. But there's no need to really get into this complication. On rook takes b7, then black is winning. For example, here, if they're then check to win the queen, or here, check will be winning the queen. So that's Wesley So's try, very resourceful try, but it's just totally bypassed for a simple and strong move, avoiding the complications. H takes g, leaving this bishop hanging. And now the queen tries to protect, but guess what? The rude interruption here of black's streams. 5 seconds, white to play in this position. Okay, f3. Yeah, the queen is beautifully placed, by the way, protecting the bishop and protecting all of white's pieces are protected here, and black's going to be losing a piece now. So queen b4, rook takes b7, piece up. Another resourceful try, bishop takes b2. If this is taken, then it's perpetual check. So yeah, Wesley's resourceful, but it's just bypassed again. Of course, queen f1, piece up. f6, queen f2, bishop e5, yeah, trying for rook d1 check, which would be dangerous because the king can't go to h2, so blunting the bishop. Bishop d6, g5, going to break up black's king already, a great way of celebrating the extra piece. Queen e4, queen f3, protecting the rook and evicting the queen, check. And now, actually, to get to move 40, some repetition here is permitted. Threatening mate in 1 with queen e1, that's noted. Queen e2, queen e4, and now we're getting to move 40 around about here. Move 40, king g3, so extra time now. Move 40. F takes g5. There's no point playing queen e1 because of bishop f2. So f takes g5. King h2, queen f5, rook f7, queen g6, f takes g5, check, and now king h3, yeah, walking the king here. And the game actually ended here quite fascinatingly. I just want to show you this final position. I mean, g3 was playable as well, white's piece up anyway, but if hg, it turns out here, because white's got the extra bishop on the knight square, it's king g4, and the king's actually safe here in this position. And it also means there's things like queen h3 on the cards. So that's actually a great move. And an example continuation, we can either get the queens off or try and play it even more precisely, like this, as an example, where there's going to be rook h5 coming up. Eventually, yeah, just to win the queen. So yeah, the game ended here after king h3, so didn't really test that. Okay, but I mean, his piece down. So not a great start for Wesley So, 0 out of 2, but yeah, it's a pretty tough tournament. So good for Grischuk there, to encourage Grischuk so he can play with these rook hack attacks. It really depends on the position. So this one really worked out well in this game. Both rooks coming in for the king, hunting the king there in this game. Great game. Hope you enjoyed it. And please let me know if you want me to cover the draws. Actually, they're all pretty important games. So I'm tempted, because we would be covering draws if it was a World Championship match. But this, so this is a very important tournament. Let me know about that as well. Okay, thanks very much. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Cheers then.